Okay, good evening, welcome to Parsha Shiur. There are only two items on the agenda tonight. One, a short intro with an interesting, I said this I think some years ago, but I've got an addition that I saw in Rabbi Sachs's Sefer that I'd like to add. And then the main piece tonight is something I saw in Rabbi Emmanuel Bernstein's Sefer, which I think is just magnificent. So let's start. If you're listening online, please email me at j.golker@gmail.com. I'll send you the handout. The Parsha begins, Parshas Vayakhel, Vayakhel Moshe es kol adas b'nei Yisrael, Vayomer aleim el hadvarim asher tziva Hashem la'asos osom. So that's the opening pasuk of this week's single Parsha. It's not normally a double set of Vayakhel Pekudei, sometimes together, sometimes separate, but this year it's on its own. Vayakhel Moshe. So says that Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, a very interesting insight. Why Vayakhel? So he says, Ha'egel, in last week's Sedra, the Egel HaZohov, Ha'yehahepech she'matan Torah. In a way, it was the antithesis of Matan Torah. Ki b'Matan Torah omru Chazal, vayichen Yisrael ke'ish echad b'leiv echad. There was wonderful unity, achdus, at the time of Matan Torah. V'kan omru b'Yerushalmi, but yet, when it came to last week's Sedra, to the Egel HaZohov, Rashi brings that they wanted to have many gods. That's what Rashi says in Parshas Kisisa. But the Yerushalmi says, Rabbi Yaakov quotes it in Sanhedrin, Ki yud beis agolim na'asu. They actually made not one golden calf, but 12. Ve'ivu le'elohus harbe, because they all wanted lots of different gods. In other words, each shevet wanted a god, for a particular fashion and style. They couldn't exactly agree, so they made 12 different gods, 12 golden calves. V'lomo ivu le'elohus harbe. Why do they want so many? Because they all wanted different things. Val karchoch, because it must be shebein hashvatim atzmon hayu chilukei deis, because amongst the different shvatim there was not consensus, there were different opinions. But mi yivcharu, which gods would they choose? V'lo bo l'dei ichud, they didn't come to consensus. V'asa kol shevet Elohe la'atzmoi, and each shevet made their own specific god. V'hainu egel miyuchad l'kol shevet. V'lefichach k'shebo Moshe lahases Yisrael al hamishkan. Therefore, when Moshe Rabbeinu came to address and to warn Klal Yisrael, to tell them about the Mishkan, his initial job was to create unity, to gather them all together. The lashon of Vayakhel, to assemble the people, it's lashon of kehillah, to make a congregation. To bring them together, b'mokum echad u'l'matora achas, for one place, for one purpose. V'daik v'tim tzakal. So says Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky very beautifully. At Matan Torah there was achdus. In last week's Parsha, the Egel HaZohov, there was disharmony, and therefore the starting point, straight after Kisisa, the beginning of the repair job, was Vayakhel Moshe, to create this unity again. Now, that was, I said that in previous years, I forget exactly when, but I came across a fascinating addendum, if you like, to this idea of Yaakov in the writings of Rabbi Sachs. He's got many Sfarim. One of them is called Lessons in Leadership, and it's a magnificent book. And he develops this theme, and he demonstrates the principle by citing a sort of a psychology, social scientific research. It's called the Robber's Cave Experiment. Have you heard of it? Robber's Cave Experiment. So listen to this experiment. It was carried out in 1954 by someone called Mr. Professor, Dr. Sheriff. So this is what he wanted to do. He wanted to understand the dynamics of group conflict and prejudice. To do so, he and his fellow researchers selected a group of 22 white 11-year-old boys, none of whom had met each other before. They were taken to a remote summer camp in Robbers Cave State Park, Oklahoma. They were randomly allocated into two groups. Initially, neither group knew of the existence of the other. They were staying in cabins far apart. The first week was dedicated to team building. The boys hiked and swam together. Each group chose a name for itself. They became the Eagles and the Rattlers. They stenciled the names on their shirts and flags. Then, for 4 days, they were introduced to one another through a series of competitions. There were trophies, medals, and prizes for the winners, and nothing for the losers. Almost immediately, there was tension between them. Name-calling, teasing, derogatory songs. It got worse. Each burned the other's flag. and raided their cabins. They objected to eating together with the others in the same dining hall. Stage 3 was called the integration phase. Meetings were arranged, the two groups watched films together, they lit 4th of July firecrackers together. The hope was that these face-to-face encounters would lessen tensions and lead to reconciliation. They didn't. Several broke up with the children throwing food at each other. In stage 4, the researchers arranged situations in which a problem arose that threatened both groups simultaneously. The first was a blockage in the supply of drinking water to the camp. The two groups identified the problem separately and gathered at the point where the blockage had occurred. They worked together to remove it and celebrated together when they succeeded. In another, both groups voted to watch some films. The researchers explained that both films would cost money to hire and there was not enough in the camp funds to do so. Both groups agreed to contribute an equal share to the cost. And in a third, the coach on which they were traveling stalled and the boys had to work together to push it. In the time the trials were over, the boys had stopped having negative images of the other side. On the final bus ride home, the members of one team used their prize money to buy drinks for everyone. Similar outcomes have emerged from other studies, writes Rabbi Sachs. The conclusion is revolutionary. You can turn even hostile factions into a single, cohesive group so long as they are faced with a shared challenge, and that all can achieve together but no one can do alone. So he concludes the following. Team building, even after a disaster like the Egel HaZahav, is neither a mystery nor a miracle. It is done by setting the group to a task, one that speaks to their passions, and one no subsection of the group can achieve alone. It must be constructive. Every member of the group must be able to make a unique contribution and then feel that it has been valued. Each must be able to say with pride, I helped make this. And that's, he says, is what Moshe Rabbeinu understood. And that's what he did. Vayakhel Moshe is building a team and creating a team that builds something together because that's how you unify the people. So a very interesting insight of Rabbi Sachs, which I think fits very well into that idea of Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky. Okay, let's move on to the main theme of this evening. Rabbi Emanuel Bernstein has got a relatively new sefer, 2 volumes on Chumash. He has some absolutely beautiful pieces in there, and he cited something by someone called Yeshua Heller. So I wasn't aware who this person was. I found the source material on the Eitzah Chachma, and he quotes, it's from the first drosha, and it's a long piece. It's about 40 or 50 pages. So I skimmed through it, and I extracted the key points. But it's really quite magnificent. The Gemara in Brachos, the starting point is here in paragraph 2. It's a Gemara in Brachos, Daf Nun Hey Amud Aleph, which actually Rashi quotes not in this week's Parsha, but in next week's Parsha. But it's relevant to, of course, to Parshas Vayakhel. Why? Because most people, if you would ask them, what is Parshas Vayakhel? They would probably tell you it's a repeat of Parshas Tetzaveh. And Tetzaveh Truma, you have a break of Kisisa, and then Vayakhel, because they pretty much repeats Truma and Tetzaveh. The theme is building the Beis HaMikdash, the Mishkan, and the Kelim of the Kohanim, etc. Now, about that, the Gemara in Brachos says the following. This is paragraph 2. B'shah she'omer HaKadosh Baruch Hu leMoshe, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to Moshe, Leich emer lo leBetzalel, aseh li Mishkan v'aron v'kelim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to Moshe Rabbeinu, go tell Betzalel, aseh li Mishkan, Aron v'kelim. Build for me a Mishkan, build the Aron, and build all the Kelim. What happened? Holach Moshe, says the Gemara in Brachos, v'hofach, he reversed the order. V'omar lo, and he said to Betzalel, aseh Aron v'kelim u'mishkan. First build the Aron, then the Kelim, and then the Mishkan. Omar lo, so Betzalel said to Moshe Rabbeinu, minhagu shel olam, the minhag of the world is, Adam boine bayis, v'achakach machnis l'soich Kelim. You can't build the Kelim first. Where are you going to store them? I remember when we got married. This is Baruch Hashem many years ago. So it was the week before. It was a few days before the Chasna, and some American friends came in. My wife's friends came in, and she went to show them where we were going to live. And there was some building work. The first week or two we weren't living there because it wasn't ready, but they had delivered the bathroom suite. And it was a block of flats, and it was left outside for the builders the next day to come, to schlep it up into the flat. And she told me afterwards, she said she walked in, she goes, here's the bathroom. and so that you need a house. You need a mishkan to house it in. So he said, minhag ha'olam is you build a mishkan first, and then machnis kelim l'soichei. Va'atza oima aseli aron v'kelim v'mishkan. You're telling me first to do the kelim and then the mishkan. Kelim shani ayaseh laheichen achnison. Where am I going to put the kelim? Shema kach omla Kadosh Baruch Hu. I say Mishkan v'Aron v'Kelim. Perhaps Moshe Rabbeinu, did HaKadosh Baruch Hu tell you to do the Mishkan and then the Aron and the Kelim? Amalai. So Moshe Rabbeinu says to Betzalel, you're quite right. Shema Betzel Kel Hoyisa. Maybe you were in the shadow of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and maybe you actually were privy to the proper conversation, because that's exactly what HaKadosh Baruch Hu told me. That's the end of the Gemara. This is a very, very strange dialogue. First of all, HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells Moshe to tell Betzalel, Aseli Mishkan, and then the Kelim. So why reverse the order? Why did Moshe not listen to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and do exactly as he was told? Second of all, what was Betzalel's response? Why did he challenge it? And what does he mean? Minhag ha'olam? Moshe Rabbeinu, aren't you aware of the way of the world? The way of the world is you build a house and then you put the Kelim inside. What exactly did he mean by that? So it's a baffling exchange. Okay, now, in short, the Oyel Yeshua, this Rabbi Yeshua Hella, he builds on he has lots of Hagdomas, he asks lots of questions, and then he has various Hagdomas. One Hagdoma is this: people are on different levels. For someone on a very lofty level, his Avas Hashem, his love for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is so strong, his desire leads to performance. Because he just wants to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What comes first? His Avas Hashem. That is what leads to performance. For the rest of us, who are not burning with Avas Hashem, it's the other way around. It's a person on a slightly lower level. There may not be a natural love that motivates performance. Rather, performance breeds an appreciation for the value of mitzvahs. Now that's borne out in many sources. Let's see how he puts it. Look, if you look at the box where it says to be, this is the early Yeshua. Mavua. Ki kiyum ha-Torah v'ha-mitzvahs nerach b'shnei arachim. There are two ways to sort of evaluate people on different levels. Aleph mitzat ha'etzem, beis mitzat ha'poel. One is through action and one is through motivating. We'll see what that means. V'nevaya hadovel inyonenu. Let's explain this as follows. Yesh lecha adam shetchunos tova. He's a very focused person, and he's almost like he's holy from birth. He's Kodesh mibeten from conception and from birth. Or maybe he acquired them through continuing practice. He just worked on himself, and now it's become second nature. Or through limut ha-Torah or performance of mitzvahs, he has purified himself to such an extent that it's no longer a battle anymore, and he has genuine avas Hashem. He just wants to do the right thing. He's on a very lofty, elevated level, far away from chet. Okay, that's level number one. And then you have other people. They're battling and they're waging constant war. They're conquering the Yetzer Hara, that they shouldn't sin. Through a lot of effort, they make the right choices. Now, a person on that lower level might not have the natural love that motivates performance, but his mahalach, his approach is he has to do the mitzvahs in order to generate the Avas Hashem. Now that is really what the Mesillas Yesharim says. The Mesillas Yesharim says in Perek Zayin that performance motivates. Take a look at this, bottom box of the page. Someone who wants to try and succeed in Avodas Hashem, who chafetz halei v'tshukas haneshama. והוא מה שדוד המלך מסהלל בחלקי הטוב ואומר כאיל תהרג על אפיקי מים, כנפשי תהרג אליך אלוקים, צומא נפשי אלוקים. He's got to create a yearning, a longing for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. ואולם, האדם אשר אין החמדה הזאת לא יחטס בעיקרו, but a person who's not yet at that stage, He's not yet at the stage of Tzom Nafshi Lelukim, where his soul yearns for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Eitz Tovahi, a good strategy is sheyizdarez b'ritzonoi kadei sheyimoshech mizeh shetoled b'hachem debeteva, to sort of generate that passion. Ki hatenua hachitzona mo'ireres hapnimis, through performance that will generate a desire to do the mitzvahs. Often I'm sitting in the basement with the boys in school, and you see a boy who's not in the mood. He's sitting back, he's schmoozing, and I go over to him, and he said he's not feeling it today, right? So I tell him this Mesilas Yesharim. I say to him, start shockling and start pumping the desk, and that gets the motor going. It's that way around. If you're not feeling it, then performance actually motivates and kickstarts the neshama. Fake it till you make it, absolutely. Ki toilet boy has simcha pnimius, because in that will give birth to an inner simcha. V'hachefetz v'hachemda mikoyach mashu mislahit b'tnuosa b'rotzon. That will generate the motivation. And really, it goes back earlier than the Mesilas Yesharim. If you look at the top of the next page, the chinuch says exactly this. I think we quoted it this year in Parsha's boy, the famous chinuch. V'at b'ni im bina shema zois v'hatzi oznuch v'shma al hametcha lohel b'torah of mitzvahs. I'll tell you a very important klal. Ki ha'adam nifal kafi pu'loisov, that a person is conditioned according to the way he behaves. V'liboy v'chol machshavois v'tomid achamaisav shu oiseh bohem. If you dress smart, you act smart. If you act in a refined manner, that will make you refined, etc. Ki achrei ha'pu'ulis nimshachim halavavos, that performance motivates a person and conditions a person. Now, interestingly, you see a template for these two levels. Think of the Shema, the first paragraph and the second paragraph. I never noticed this before, really. Look at the first paragraph of the Shema. V'ahavta es Hashem Elokecha. What comes first? The ahava, the love. And then, ukshartim lo'isalidecha chsavtam moses besecha. The first paragraph of the Shema is talking about the person on level 1. He's got that yearning, that burning desire to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that is what leads to performance. What comes first is the inner motivation, and then ukshartim lo'isalidecha, v'uchsavtam moses besecha, etc. But v'hoyim Shema, the next paragraph of Shema, is the other person. It's level 2. First, you have v'hoyim Shema tishma mitzvosai. First, perform all the mitzvahs, and then that will generate lavos Hashem Elokecha. So you see a template for these two levels. Now, also interesting, the higher the level 1 person, the more unity there is. Because there's a certain achdus with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that's why, in the first paragraph of the Shema, it's in the singular, v'ahavta es Hashem Elokecha. And in the second paragraph, it's im shomoya tishma'u, lavos Hashem Elokechem. It's in the plural. Now, that's point number 2. Point number 3, very interesting observation. Again, I'm condensing a sort of a 40-page drosha into literally a few sound bites. The Gemara in Makkah says that there is 613 commandments. Well, we're familiar with Taryag mitzvahs. Where does it come from? It comes from this Gemara, Makkah's Chaf Gimel Amud Beis. Says the Gemara there, Darash of Simloi, Sheish Me'ez v'shlosh esrei mitzvahs nemru leMoshe. Moshe Rabbeinu was given 613 mitzvahs. Interestingly, Sholosh Me'ez v'shishim v'chomesh lavin kamini nemosachama. Of those 613, 365 are negative, a lavin, which correspond to the days of the year, or Masayim, v'abroim v'shmoin, and 248 are say, are positive commandments, keneged evar shel Adam. Now, the Ol Yeshua, this Rabbi Shua Hela, says something amazing. Cain. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted to reside in Klal Yisrael, and he commanded Klal Yisrael to build a Mishkan, when you count up every keli and every beam of the Mishkan, achas la'achas, limsa cheshbonam, nimsa misparam, oile amuchuvan lemisbahat haryag. You will get exactly 613. And in his drosha, he lists them. He does the cheshbon. 613 parts to the Mishkan. Exactly corresponding to the 613 mitzvahs. Now, there are 2 parts to those 613 parts of the Mishkan, which correspond to the 613 mitzvahs. You have the inner parts of the Mishkan, for example, the Kelim, and then you have the outer parts, the beams, the coverings, and things like that. Now, the inner parts of the Mishkan, i.e. the Kelim, they correspond to the sort of the inner feelings of a person, and the outer parts, they correspond, if you like, he says, to the external, more practical performance of mitzvahs. And therefore, this is sort of putting all this together. In Parshas Truma, which is before the Parshas Kisisa, before the Chet of the Egel, the direction of the Avodah was from the inside, because we were on a loftier level, and there was a motivation, the desire was there to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu was saying that Klal Yisrael on a very lofty level. You need to do the inner kelim first, which represents the inner thoughts and feelings of a person, because that's where we're holding. Therefore, you make the kelim before you make the Mishkan. However, in Parshas Vayakhel, which is after the sin of the Egel HaZahav, sadly, because they were on a lower level now, the direction was reversed. And there was need for the outer action first, which will then lead to that, the inner feelings of Avos Hashem and motivation to do things. Therefore, the Mishkan was commanded first, and only after that were the Kelim made. And that really is the dialogue between Moshe and Betzalel. Because Moshe Rabbeinu, why did he reverse Hashem's instruction? Because he was sort of protesting against the post-Egel state. He said, no, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we haven't dropped. Don't let us go to level 2. We're still burning with desire to serve you. We still want to express our Avos Hashem. And therefore, we do the inner kelim first, which represent the 613 aspects of the Mishkan. The inner parts of the Mishkan, i.e. the kelim, correspond to the inner feelings and thoughts of a person. Let's do that first. Betzalel's response to Moshe Rabbeinu was, he delicately indicated to Moshe that the people had actually shifted. There had been sadly, there was a fundamental shift, and there was more of an affinity with Minhag Olam, with the way of the world. And it was sadly necessary, therefore, to make the outer Mishkan and the coverings the external practical mitzvahs, because that is what's going to generate that feelings once more. So that's what really was going on between the Moshe Rabbeinu and Betzalel. Now, this concept, explaining this dialogue, level 1, level 2, higher levels and lower levels, explains other peculiarities with the Parsha. Because in Parshas Truma, the Pasuk says, Esrim Keresh. When it describes the beams, it says Esrim Keresh in the singular. And when you're describing the same beams in Parshas Vayakhel, the Pasuk says Esrim Keroshim in the plural. Same thing. Why the difference? That's the same difference as the Shema and V'hoyim Shemoya. In Shema, which is the higher level, the more unity there is, you use the singular. That's why the first paragraph of the Shema is V'ahavto es Hashem Elokecha in the singular, because there's more unity there, and therefore there's no. In level 2, when there's more disparity, there's less unity, you use Lashon Rabbim, V'hoyim Shemoya Tishmu. Therefore, in Parshas Vayakhel, it's Esrim Keroshim. Same again, in Parshas Truma, it says V'os Siso Shnayim Keruvim, which is like a pair of Keruvim, almost like a singular expression. And in Parshas Vayakhel, Vayas Shnei Keruvim, which is an expression of plurality. Same idea. And that's why another peculiarity is, where was Betzalel in Parshas Truma? He doesn't appear once. The answer is there was no need for him yet. Because, first of all, Moshe Rabbeinu was able to build the Kelim on the inside, and they were on a high level. And then you build the Mishkan. Because the motivation, the strong Avos Hashem, the desire was there, the Kelim come first, and then you build the outer Mishkan. But Betzalel was needed, is only brought into the scene in Parshas Kisisa last week, and very prominently in this week's Parsha, because he was able to understand that there was a shift in the level of Klal Yisrael, and he was able to understand the Minhag Olam, the way of the world, is that it was sort of sadly necessary to build the Mishkan first, and then to make the Kelim. So it's a very beautiful piece, and explains lots of different things, primarily this very baffling exchange between Moshe and Betzalel. But now we understand why Moshe Rabbeinu reversed Hashem's instructions, because he was protesting to the sort of the post-Egel drop, and Betzalel's response was saying, listen, sadly Moshe Rabbeinu, this is where Klal Yisrael are holding. They've dropped the level now. And therefore, minhag ha'olam is we have to do the practical mitzvahs to generate our Avos Hashem again. And that's reflected by the outer Mishkan and the coverings, the externals, and that will motivate that inner feeling once again. So two fascinating ideas.
Did you mention the first part of the program that you've got on the bottom?
So the point.
And then it says Vayakhel.
So yeah, I knew I shouldn't put those words in, but my point is, it's the Shnayim Kruvim, which is an expression of like a pair of Kruvim. And in Parshas Vayakhel, post the Egel, it's Shnei Kruvim, which is two. So you have it's lashon of plural. So in the first, it's like a unit. It's a pair of Kruvim. It's a singular lashon, similar to the first paragraph of Shema. And then in Parshas Vayakhel, it's Shnei Kruvim. Vosisa and Vayas is I shouldn't have put it in, but I knew it would confuse, and it did. Okay, all right, Peseda. We'll leave it there.